This presentation provides an overview of gifted and talented students. In this presentation, you will learn about the history of gifted education, definitions of giftedness, the prevalence of gifted students, characteristics of gifted and talented students, and best practices for teaching students who are gifted and talented. One of the pioneers that paved the way for gifted education is Lewis Terman. Along with his colleagues, Terman began a longitudinal study in 1921 related to the study of students who are gifted. Results of this study have debunked the myth that students who are gifted typically have social and emotional abnormalities, and the study also has shown that a large number of gifted students do accomplish significant achievements later in life. Other researchers during the first half of the 20th century also contributed to the development of gifted education, providing insights into the characteristics of gifted learners and suggestions about giftedness being defined more broadly than what is measured on an intelligence test. After the Soviet Union's launch of Sputnik in 1959, efforts to enhance the education of gifted learners were put into action to respond to this embarrassment that the U.S. was not the first country to achieve spaceflight. At this time, teachers were provided with resources for how to teach and counsel gifted learners, but gifted education was still optional. In 1972, the Marlin Report was published after Congress commissioned a study of public school services for students who are gifted. This report noted that gifted learners were typically not being served and that some school professionals were actually antagonistic toward them. The report was also responsible for broadening the definition of giftedness. During the 1970s and 1980s, programs for students who are gifted began to grow, receiving financial support from state educational agencies. In 1988, Congress passed the Jacob K. Javits Gifted and Talented Students Education Act that focused on identifying and serving gifted learners from culturally diverse backgrounds, those living in poverty, and those with disabilities. In 1990, the U.S. Department of Education established the National Research Center on the Gifted and Talented to address research in the field. In 1993, the center published National Excellence, A Case for Developing America's Talent, which updated the definition of giftedness, noted the importance of nurturing gifts and talents in all students, and emphasized the importance of identifying and serving gifted students from diverse groups. The most recent definition of giftedness is included in the Jacob K. Javits Gifted and Talented Students Education Act. It reads as follows: children and youth with outstanding talent who perform or show the potential for performing at remarkably high levels of accomplishment when compared with others of their age, experience, or environment. These children and youth exhibit high performance capability in intellectual, creative, and/or artistic areas, possess an unusual leadership capacity, or excel in specific academic fields. They require services or activities not ordinarily provided by the schools. Outstanding talents are present in children and youth from all cultural groups, across all economic strata, and in all areas of human endeavor. Some researchers present other conceptualizations of giftedness. For example, in 2002, Renzulli proposed the three-ring model of giftedness, which consists of number 1, above average ability, number 2, task commitment, which relates to motivation, and number 3, creativity. Tomlinson suggests that giftedness is not static, but is influenced by opportunity and environment. And this is a very important notion for teachers to recognize, because oftentimes it's only the gifted learners or students who are identified as having gifts and talents that receive enhanced educational opportunities, whereas those opportunities can actually improve the performance of all learners, not just students who are gifted. Howard Gardner conceptualized the 9 types of intelligences in 1983, and he defines giftedness as an absolute strength in any or all of the intelligence when compared to others. On average, approximately 12% of students are identified as gifted and talented. However, minority groups are significantly underrepresented in programs for students who are gifted and talented. This is the opposite in regards to students with disabilities. Minority groups are significantly overrepresented in categories of students with disabilities, but underrepresented in the gifted population. For example, a 2002 study showed that Caucasian students are 3 to 4 times more likely to be identified as gifted than African American students. Another disparity is that girls are less likely than boys to be identified as mathematically gifted. This doesn't mean they are less likely to be mathematically gifted, just less likely to be identified as gifted. And consequently, they're less likely to be encouraged to take advanced math and science classes when in high school compared to boys. As far as determining factors, giftedness is considered to be a result of a combination of genetic and environmental factors, meaning there is a heredity component, whereas if one child or parent is identified as having gifted, it's likely that other children will also be likely as being gifted, as well as it's likely that environmental factors impact the development of gifts and talents. So the cultural experiences that children experience, literacy experiences, language experiences, etc., impact their development of gifts and talents. Students who are gifted and talented may display various cognitive, academic, and social-emotional characteristics. There are a variety of cognitive characteristics that students who are gifted and talented may display. Keep in mind that not all students who are gifted display all of these characteristics. One characteristic is the ability to manipulate abstract symbol systems. This often helps students with literacy skills, reading development, language development, and mathematical development. Many students also have the power of concentration and can focus for very long periods of times when they're working on something. Students may have an unusually well-developed memory and can have an outstanding rote memory when it comes to various academic content. Some students will have early language interest and development and begin speaking very early and then have early literacy development as a result. Many students who are gifted have high levels of curiosity and will ask lots of questions from early on and continually be challenging thoughts and ideas to engage in creative endeavors. Many students with gifts and talents prefer independent work as opposed to working with others. Many students who are gifted and talented have multiple interests instead of just focusing on one or two special interests. And oftentimes these students have the ability to generate original ideas through creative thought and critical thinking and problem solving. Keep in mind that a lot of these characteristics may not be present all the time for all students, and that some children develop these skills later on in life as opposed to when they were younger, and some students demonstrate these skills related to things that they're really interested in, not necessarily across the board for all topics and activities. Students who are academically gifted can have various characteristics related to reading, writing, speaking, and mathematical behaviors. For example, students might read voraciously. They walk around with a book and they're constantly reading, and they're just very literate across a variety of different content areas as well. Some students might have specific writing behaviors where they can write fluently and elaborate when they're writing stories. They might have advanced sentence structures as compared to peers. They might be interested in writing on adult topics. They might use precise descriptive language to evoke images for those who are reading their writing. When it comes to speaking behaviors, they typically may have strong vocabulary. They might use similes, metaphors, and analogies when having conversations with others. And for mathematical behaviors, they would think logically and symbolically. They would be able to reason analytically, deductively, and inductively, and they can transfer learning to novel situations. Again, not all students who are gifted have all of these behaviors, but these are examples of behaviors you might see in students who are gifted and talented. Students who are gifted may have a variety of different social and emotional characteristics. Some students might have a strong sense of justice and advocate for social justice in their communities and in the world. Some students have a strong sense of altruism and idealism, a strong sense of humor, emotional intensity, which does impact their altruism, idealism, their sense of justice. Some students do have perfectionism, which of course can work counterproductive if they want to be perfect all the time and cannot move on to other things until they're perfect. So that does have to be handled sensitively. Some students who are gifted have a high level of energy where they want to really dedicate their energy and focus on something that they're excited about learning or excited about doing, and will maintain that energy through completion of that assignment or activity. Some students have strong attachments and commitments, and this could be to people and or to their work. And they also could have aesthetic sensitivity related to the arts and music, and really be able to take apart and understand different artistic and musical concepts. There are a variety of best practices that should be used when teaching students who are gifted and talented. One strategy is curriculum compacting. This strategy prevents students from having to engage in instructional activities in which they have already mastered. So this is done by pre-assessing the student before a unit of instruction to identify which skills the student has already mastered, and then compacting the curriculum for that student and having the student move on, only being exposed to new material and maybe moving on to other material that was not intended for that unit based on the compacting. Another strategy is acceleration, and that means that students are able to learn academic content at quicker rates than their peers. So in one school year, they might go through 2 school years worth of mathematics, whereas other students would go through 1 school year. Another strategy is the use of enrichment, and that provides opportunities for students to go into deeper learning and engage in critical thinking skills and solve problems and do more advanced work, as opposed to only compacting the curriculum and accelerating the curriculum. You provide opportunities for them to go deeper into learning. The fourth strategy here is differentiation, and there is an entire module on differentiated instruction that you have available that you could go in and learn more about that. But basically that means that you differentiate what students learn, how students learn, and how they are assessed to address their readiness levels, interests, and learning profiles. And finally, using problem-based learning or project-based learning as a strategy to support students who are gifted is a commonly used practice, and this means that there's an authentic problem that's presented to students that is happening in their community, in their school, in the world, and they engage in a project to solve that problem, and they typically do that in collaboration with peers.